Hey guys, it's Chris. Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. And what we're going to do for this episode is we're going to jump back in time a little bit. I know that, with previous episodes, I've kind of just like jumped in and we started a project from scratch and worked our way through it. But that's without actually teaching you guys how to properly maneuver around the Unity interface. You know, what all the different components are called and what they're for. I never really took the time to make C# basic tutorials to sort of teach you guys, what programming really is. And, some of you are really good about it and, you understand programming, so you're jumping right in and you know what you're doing. But there are a lot of you that are kind of just blindly following, and I'm not trying to sound mean, but that's, everybody starts somewhere. But what I want to do is I want to provide you guys with a place where you can start and learn and actually understand what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to teach you how to use the Unity interface. I'm going to teach you how to learn the basics of C# so that you can understand when I say, hey, we're going to create a class. Or we're going to make a vector2 or an integer or a string or any of those. So what you guys are going to get from this is you're going to learn how to do all that. Now, this isn't going to be just one tutorial. It's going to be a series of tutorials. The Unity interface is going to be pretty simple, so that maybe we can fit into one or two tutorials. I think this one, what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a high-level overview of what the interface is, the different parts of the interface, and maybe what they're for, but not much more in depth than that. After the next tutorial, we'll basically delve right into the Unity interface and actually give you a hands-on approach as to how you can manipulate things and make it work for you, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Right now I'm using Unity 5.4. I know a lot of you are probably still in Unity 5.3, so this screen might look a little different for you. If you have the chance, I'd say go ahead and upgrade to Unity 5.4. They've made a lot of feature enhancements and improvements, fixed a lot of bugs. So I would go with this version, just my personal recommendation. So here, the first thing we're greeted with is a new project, since we haven't created any previous ones. So let's click on that. The very next screen is, Okay, so the very next screen is where we can define some basic project parameters, right? So we need to give our project a name, of course. So we're going to call this Unity 101. All right. Then Unity wants to know, okay, well, what type of environment are you going to work in? And we are most of the time going to work in a 2D environment. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And basically what that does is it sets up the Unity editor and the environment to give you the best tools to use in a 2D basically world instead of 3D. All right, and then the very next thing is going to be location, and this is very, very important because you're going to want to know where your project is actually living on your computer. In my case, I'm saving my projects to the desktop because they're easily accessible that way and easy to find. So the great thing about Unity is that when you're creating a project and you've got your location selected, is when you're naming your project, like for instance Unity 101, when we click Create Project, what's going to happen is Unity is actually going to create a folder on your desktop named Unity 101 with all of your project files basically residing within it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on Create Project. Oh, one more thing. Unity has this new feature, Unity Analytics, which is basically provide you with information about your app and how it's being used with users and things like that. We're just going to leave that off because we don't really need that information right now because we're not submitting anything to the App Store. So let's go ahead and click Create Project. Alright, see how that Unity 101 folder was created here? Alright, so first things first. Unity. I remember my first time using Unity, and I remember opening it, and then I was like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, so I'm done with this, and let's just shut it down and go back to coding Objective-C. And, instead of all this button pushing, and yeah, no. So I'm I was not happy with looking at this Unity interface. I thought it was very complex, and I didn't know what was what, because it can be very daunting. There's so many windows actually called panels, but we're going to demystify all those. Okay, so here we go. So at the very top here, we've got our toolbar. Okay, so let's talk about what's on our toolbar. All right. We have in the first section here, we've got our transform tools, and these are pretty simple, and they all basically allow us to manipulate our game objects, such as our main camera. That's our game object right now, the only game object in our scene. So let's say we select our pan tool. That's actually the hand, which is call it our pan tool. We can move our, we're not moving around our camera, okay? We're moving around the scene view. So, like, if there was another game object here, you would see that we're not just moving the camera around, we're actually moving the scene view around. To move the camera around, however, we can use our translate tool. And we can do that by grabbing onto any one of these handles here. So this moves the camera around. Okay, so let's make that go back to 0. And then we've got our rotate tool, which of course allows us to rotate our camera. And then we've got this scale tool so that we can scale our game objects. Okay, so we're not even going to worry about scaling our camera right now. So the other things here are we've got the transform gizmo toggles. So center and local is basically how it's going to affect the scene. How we're actually, like, when we use these tools, we can tell it to pivot, or we can tell it to center. And we can tell it if it's local or global, and more on that later. This is not the time to go into all that. So then we've got our buttons here. This is our play button, our pause button, and our step button. Okay, the play button will take us to the game view, and it'll actually run whatever code we've got in our scene. And the pause button, once we're in play, can actually pause the game, and the step button will actually take us through line by line of the code that's currently being executed, so that we can. This is used for debugging. Okay. So then we've got this button here is actually kind of new, and I think they added this in Unity 5.4, and this is called the cloud button, which actually just opens the services button that Unity now offers as part of integrating into your game. So we're not going to go into that right now, and this is something we'll probably go into very, very much later. So not even anything that we're going to cover right now. Here we've got our account drop down. We've got, so we can go to our account, we can sign out, or we can upgrade to the pro version of Unity. We've got our layers, which we're going to get into later. I know you guys are loving this. We're going to get into that later. That's okay though, because pretty soon you guys are going to get tired of going into all this detail about all these different buttons. So we've got our layout. Layout is actually something that I want to cover really quick, because this is really, really useful, and I would say the very basic essence of the Unity editor is how you have your windows laid out to, work with it the best. So let's say that, for instance, we've got, and by the way, I'm going to call them appropriately, they are called panels. So we've got our inspector panel, services panel, we've got our scene panel, game panel, asset store panel, animator panel, we've got our hierarchy panel, project panel, console panel. So these are all panels. And any one of these panels can be moved. They can be resized. So we can click here, we can make this smaller, we can make it larger. Same thing with our hierarchy, smaller, larger. We can shrink this down too. And let's say we don't like the services up here at the top, we can actually just drag it and, you know, put it here. Or if we want it here, we can also create it here. If we want the console to be right here, we can put that here. Now realize that our scene view is getting smaller and smaller because we are, you know, creating new windows and or sections to put our panels in. So let's keep things where they look good, right? To me, anyways. You know, we can also close any of these tabs or panels. So right-clicking and closing the tab. I don't really use the animator quite so often, so I'm gonna close that tab. I don't really, I mean, yeah, I go into the asset store, but I don't need that to be a tab. The console, I kind of like, we'll keep that open, and I like my project view. And I like my project view actually kind of here, and because I like my console to be here, and I don't like, see, my hierarchy already takes space on the left hand side, so I don't mind adding something to the bottom, and this starts scrolling once you add more things into your scene, and so do these. So I just like to be able to see my console output all the time, because I like to see what's happening. So I do a lot of like logs that you know, show me what's going on in the background when I'm running my application, but that is way too much information for right now. I'm giving you guys too much information for the basics of the Unity. So let me slow down a little bit here, and let's go back to the layout. Now that I've got my layout the way I like it, I'm going to go ahead and save my layout. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this best ever. And that's just because I'm being funny. So we've got our best ever layout now as part of our layouts. Now let's say we want to revert back to factory settings because, I don't know, maybe we like that and we made a mistake and we're like, oh, you know what, I really don't like this layout and I just want to be like everybody else. So we're going to go to revert to factory settings. And it's going to say, oh, continue? Sure, yeah, we'll do that. And here we are back at where we were when we first started. All the windows sized appropriately and everything back in its place. And then Unity also has some default, and you know what, sorry, let me step back. This revert to factory settings is very, very useful in case you, you know, are like, hey, oh, I closed the inspector. Where did that go? Because a lot of times that happened to me when I first started using Unity. When I close a window, I'm like, okay, well, how do I get it back? So you can do two things. You can go to layout and you can go revert factory settings, continue, and there's the inspector back. Or let's say that you're working on a layout, right? And you're like moving things around, and you're like clicking on things, and you're like, oh, you know, I don't need this, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I do need that. So I don't want to revert back to my factory layout because then I'll lose all my other custom settings. So how do I get the inspector back? Well, up here at the window, you can just go window and click on inspector. And then what will happen is it'll open inspector in a separate window, but all you do is you click on the tab and you just kind of move it where you want it to be, right? So we want that right here. And there we go. Now we've got our inspector back where we want it. And yep, exactly. So just like that. And just like that, you can manipulate the Unity layout, which is actually really, really useful. And depending on what your workflow is, you know, if you're mostly doing animations, then you're going to want a whole lot of different windows than the guy who's doing the coding or the guy who's doing the scene building, the level editing, any of that stuff. So layouts are awesome. Makes the workflow so much easier. Yeah, so I'm not going to cover what every single one of these panels does, but that's going to be in the next tutorial. You know, what's the console for, what's the project for, what's inspector for, hierarchy, and all these other windows that we don't even have right now. So what I'll do is I'm going to end the episode here. And hopefully this was useful to someone. Like I said, this is very, very beginnings of Unity, and it's kind of just to get you a primer of what Unity is, and that it's not scary. Okay, it's easy to use. So the next tutorial is going to be more in depth, and we're going to talk about what each of the panels does. We're going to talk about how to import assets, what assets are. We're going to talk about organization of assets, and we're also going to get into prefabs a little bit and what those are and why they're so useful. Which is another like whole premise of Unity is like game objects, and so I'm gonna stop talking now because again we're getting off topic. So don't forget to like the video and subscribe and comment down below if you've got questions. I don't know if you'd have questions about the basics of Unity, but hey. So anyways, I will see you guys next time, and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.